Victoria changed our locks during David's funeral. I stood there holding my son's memorial program, still wearing my black suit, and watched this 29-year-old woman I'd called daughter for 3 years unlock what used to be my front door. She'd driven straight from the cemetery to a hardware store. "You have 10 minutes to get your stuff, old man," she said, not even looking at me. "This is my house now." I could have argued, could have begged, could have reminded her that David and I built that deck together last summer, that his childhood bedroom still had his Little League trophies. Instead, I smiled. Just a small one. The kind I used to give suspects who thought they were smarter than 30 years of federal training. She had no idea what she'd just activated. "Here's David's will," Victoria said, pulling a handwritten document from her purse. "Everything goes to me. The house, the business, the foundation, all of it." I took the paper. My hands didn't shake. After 3 decades in FBI digital forensics, you learn to keep steady when examining evidence, even when that evidence is supposed to destroy your life. The handwriting looked like David's, but there was something about that ink that didn't look right. "I know this is hard for you, James," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "But David made his wishes clear. I was his wife. I took care of him during the cancer. You were just what? A broke computer janitor who never understood his success." That stung, but not for the reasons she thought. See, Victoria knew I'd worked for the government. She just assumed I'd been some low-level IT support. David had never corrected her. He was proud of his father's work, but he also knew the value of operational security. What Victoria didn't know was that I'd spent 30 years building the most sophisticated digital forensics unit in the FBI's history. I'd caught cyber criminals who thought they were untouchable. I'd unraveled financial conspirations that spanned continents. And now I was looking at what appeared to be a forged will. "David's business is worth $2.3 million, Victoria said, scrolling through her phone like she was checking the weather. "Bluebridge Technologies has been growing every year. The cybersecurity consulting alone brings in $500,000 annually. Bluebridge, David's baby. He'd started it in our garage 5 years ago, building cybersecurity systems for small businesses. By the time he died, they were protecting data for Fortune 500 companies." "Then there's the David Mitchell Foundation," Victoria continued. "Another $2.3 million in assets, all dedicated to helping families dealing with cancer. Very touching, very profitable." The foundation. David had started it after his diagnosis, wanting to help other families navigate the financial nightmare of cancer treatment. Every dollar donated went directly to medical bills, rent assistance, and counseling services. Or at least, it was supposed to. "I'll need you to remove your belongings within the week," Victoria said. "I'm having the locks changed again tomorrow. Better security system, too. Can't be too careful with all this valuable property." I photographed the will with my phone. Not obvious about it. Just a quick shot while pretending to hand it back. 30 years of evidence collection leaves certain reflexes intact. "Where will you be staying?" I asked. "Derek's moving in next week," she said. "My boyfriend. We've been together for 8 months now." 8 months. David had been dead for exactly 4 days. "I see." "Don't give me that look, James." David knew about Derek. We were separated when David got sick. I only came back to take care of him because it was the right thing to do. Because I'm a good person. A good person. Who started dating someone else while her husband fought cancer. Who changed the locks during his funeral. Who was already moving her boyfriend into the master bedroom. "The funeral was lovely," I said. "It was expensive," Victoria replied. $47,000. Good thing the foundation can cover memorial expenses. David would have wanted the best. 47,000 for a service that should have cost maybe 15. I made a mental note to check the foundation's books. In my experience, when someone steals a little, they've usually stolen a lot. "I'll need time to arrange new housing," I said. "You have until Sunday. Derek doesn't want reminders of David around when he moves in. Too depressing." Victoria walked through the house like she was appraising artwork. A touch of lamp here, straighten a picture there. Everything was hers now. Everything David had worked for, everything he'd built, everything he'd dreamed of leaving for families like ours. "Oh, and James?" she called from the kitchen. "I'll need you to take down all those photos of David, the ones in the living room, the hallway, everywhere. It's unhealthy for me to see constant reminders. I'm trying to heal and move forward. Move forward. 4 days after burying her husband, I gathered my things methodically. Clothes, personal documents, my laptop bag. The laptop was FBI issued.
technically retired but still loaded with software that could crack open digital secrets like a can opener. As I packed, I examined that photograph of the will more closely. The paper looked right. The handwriting looked right. But something was off about the ink composition. Modern ink under certain lighting conditions shows oxidation patterns.
This ink looked too fresh for a document supposedly written 6 months ago. I'll be in touch about the foundation transition, I told Victoria on my way out. Don't bother. I'm hiring professional management, people who understand modern business practices. No offense, but this isn't 1995 anymore. No offense taken, because Victoria was absolutely right. This wasn't 1995. In 1995, digital forensics was barely a field. Computer crimes were investigated by detectives who thought Ram was a male sheep. Financial fraud was tracked through paper trails that could be shredded and burned. But this was 2024. Every transaction left digital fingerprints. Every document carried metadata. Every lie created data inconsistencies that could be tracked, analyzed, and proven. Victoria thought she was dealing with a grieving old man who didn't understand her modern world. She was about to learn that I'd helped build it. Victoria called me 3 days later. James, we need to talk. I was sitting in my temporary apartment, a modest place I'd rented month to month near downtown Charlotte. My laptop was open, displaying the preliminary analysis I'd been running on that will photograph. Good morning, Victoria. Cut the polite act. I know what you're trying to do. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm grieving my son. Bullshit. You've been asking questions, calling the bank, bothering David's business partners. It stops now. Interesting. I hadn't called anyone yet, but someone was clearly nervous enough to think I had. I was simply trying to understand David's final wishes, I said. His final wishes are in black and white. The will is legal. I had it probated yesterday. Everything is mine, and if you keep harassing people with your conspiracy theories, I'll file a restraining order. Conspiracy theories. Don't play dumb. You think I forged that will. You think I'm some kind of criminal. You think your precious son couldn't possibly have left everything to his wife instead of his pathetic father? The venom in her voice was remarkable. 3 days ago she'd played the grieving widow. Now the mask was slipping. Victoria, I just want to make sure David's foundation continues helping families in need. The foundation is fine, better than fine. I've already accessed the accounts and started restructuring the expenditures. Some of David's spending decisions were frankly irresponsible. Access the accounts. 3 days after his death. What kind of restructuring? None of your business. But since you're being nosy, I've identified several unnecessary expenses. Payments to vendors that were clearly overcharging, consulting fees that were way above market rate. David was too trusting, too generous with other people's money. Can you give me specifics? I don't owe you specifics, James. I don't owe you explanations. I don't owe you anything. You're not family anymore. You're just some old man who can't accept that his son grew up and built a life that didn't revolve around Daddy. Some old man. There it was again. The dismissive tone that assumed age meant obsolescence. I understand you're under stress, I said. I'm under stress because you won't leave me alone. Do you know what people are saying? That you're harassing a grieving widow, that you're trying to contest a legal will because you're jealous of a successful young woman, that you're just another bitter old man who can't stand seeing his daughter-in-law succeed. People were saying that, were they? 3 days after the funeral, and Victoria was already managing public opinion. I'm not trying to cause problems. Good, because Derek's moving in tomorrow, and I don't want him to have to deal with your drama. He's successful. He's building something. He doesn't need to be dragged into family dysfunction. Derek, the boyfriend who was moving into my son's house less than a week after the funeral. What does Derek do for work? He's in tech, software development. He actually understands modern business, unlike some people. He's helping me optimize the foundation's operations. Software development. Helping optimize the foundation. How convenient. Victoria, I want you to know that I'm not your enemy. I love David. I want his legacy to continue helping people. His legacy is helping people. Me. I dedicated 2 years of my life to caring for a dying man. I sacrificed my career, my social life, my future. I earned every dollar David left me. Earned. Interesting choice of words. I'm sure you did. Don't patronize me, I know exactly what you think. Poor little gold digger married the sick computer nerd for his money. Well, guess what? I loved David. And even if I didn't, I still would have earned everything he left me just for changing his IV bags and cleaning up his vomit. The cruelty was breathtaking. David had fought cancer with more dignity than most people faced a common cold. He'd never complained, never felt sorry for himself, never stopped working to help other families even as his own body failed him. I'm sure David appreciated your care. He did. That's why he left me everything. That's why he wrote that will. That's why he made sure his father wouldn't get a single dollar. She was lying. David would never have cut me out entirely. But more importantly, she was confirming details about the will that I hadn't asked about. I should let you go, I said. I'm sure you have a lot to handle. I do, including a very expensive house to maintain and a foundation to run properly. For the first time in years, that money will actually go to people who deserve it. People who deserve it. The foundation had always helped families dealing with cancer. But Victoria's definition of deserving might be different from David's.
Take care of yourself, Victoria.
I will. And James, this is your last warning. Stay away from David's business. Stay away from the foundation. Stay away from me. You have no legal standing, no claim to anything, and no right to interfere with David's final wishes. She hung up. I sat back and reviewed what I'd learned. Victoria was defensive about the will. She'd accessed foundation accounts immediately. She was restructuring expenditures. She had a software developer boyfriend helping her optimize operations, and she'd mentioned something interesting. She said David wrote the will. Not that he had it prepared, not that he signed it, that he wrote it. Handwritten wills are legal in North Carolina, but they're also much easier to forge. I opened my laptop and began examining that photograph more carefully. The metadata told me exactly when and where it was taken, but the document itself was about to tell me much more. That's when I noticed the metadata discrepancy.
The metadata was impossible. I stared at my laptop screen, running the analysis for the third time. According to the image data, Victoria had photographed that will at 2:47 p.m. on October 15th. But according to the GPS coordinates embedded in the file, she was at Office Max when she took it. Office Max, not David's house, not a lawyer's office, an office supply store, the same day as David's funeral. I called my old partner at the FBI, Agent Sarah Williams. She'd moved to the white-collar crime division after our unit was restructured, but she still had access to the document analysis lab at Quantico. James Mitchell. Hell, I thought you'd disappeared into retirement bliss. I need a favor, Sarah. Personal or professional? Both. My son died last week. His widow produced a will that feels wrong. The line went quiet. Sarah knew about David's cancer. She'd sent flowers when I took family leave during his final months. What kind of wrong? I need ink dating and handwriting analysis. Something feels off. You know I can't run unofficial tests on family documents. This involves a $2.3 million foundation for cancer families. If I'm right, someone's stealing from people who can't afford lawyers. Another pause. Sarah had kids of her own. Send me the image. Unofficial preliminary look only. If there's something there, we'll figure out the proper channels. I transmitted the will photograph through encrypted channels we'd used for decades. While I waited, I started digging into Blue Bridge Technologies' financial records. As David's father and emergency contact, I still had access to some business systems. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 18 months, there had been 24 irregular transfers from business accounts, each one for exactly $7,495. Each one coded as consulting fees or contract payments. Each one authorized by Victoria Bennett Mitchell using her power of attorney. $7,495. Just under the $7,500 threshold that triggers automatic federal reporting for cash transactions. Someone knew exactly how to steal money without attracting attention. My phone buzzed. Sarah. James, you need to see this. The ink analysis shows modern polymer compounds consistent with 2024 manufacturing. The document you photographed was written within the last 30 days. The will is dated 6 months ago. Then someone's lying. But there's more. The handwriting analysis shows pressure inconsistencies typical of forgery. Someone was copying another person's writing style. They were good, but not perfect. Forgery. I'd suspected it, but hearing confirmation felt like getting punched in the stomach. How confident are you? 93%. Good enough for federal court if you can prove chain of custody. Chain of custody. The foundation of every criminal prosecution I'd ever built. Sarah, I need you to run one more check. Financial transaction analysis for suspicious patterns. I'm transmitting account numbers now. Jesus, James, how deep does this go? I'm about to find out.
After hanging up, I drove to downtown Charlotte and parked across from the Hilton where Victoria was hosting a charity gala announcement. According to social media, she was unveiling plans for the David Mitchell Foundation's expansion. I watched through my car window as she posed for photographers in a $15,000 Hermes Birkin handbag and an $8,500 Cartier Santos watch. Both recent purchases, according to her Instagram posts. Expensive accessories for a grieving widow on a dead husband's budget. My phone rang. Sarah again. The pattern analysis is damning. 24 transactions over 18 months, all just under federal reporting thresholds.
Total amount stolen, $180,000. This is textbook embezzlement, James. $180,000. Stolen from families fighting cancer. There's more, Sarah continued. The authorization codes show the transfers were made from 3 different IP addresses. 2 from the hospital where your son was treated, and 1 from a residential address. Can you trace the residential address? Already did. It's registered to Victoria Bennett, apartment 4B at 847 Providence Road. 847 Providence Road. I knew that address. It was an upscale complex where rent started at $4,000 a month. Sarah, I need to ask you something unofficial. Shoot. If someone was planning to liquidate a foundation entirely, how would they do it legally? Depends on the foundation structure. If it's a private foundation with a single board member, they could vote to dissolve and transfer assets to another qualified charity.
Or to themselves if they structured the paperwork correctly. How long would that take? If they had all the documentation in order, maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Victoria had already been restructuring expenditures for 3 days. I made my decision right there in that parking lot, watching my son's widow celebrate her inheritance while wearing stolen money. Enough. Time to show her what 30 years of federal training looked like.
I spent the next week building a case file that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. Every transaction Victoria had made left digital fingerprints. Every lie she'd told created data inconsistencies. Every theft she'd committed generated an electronic trail that pointed directly back to her manicured fingers. The woman who called me a broke computer janitor had no idea she was stealing from someone who'd helped design the very systems tracking her crimes. First, I traced the IP addresses. The hospital transactions were easy to explain. Victoria had legitimate access to foundation accounts while managing David's care. But the third address, 847 Providence Road, told a different story. Victoria had been accessing foundation funds from her personal apartment for 8 months, long before David's death, long before she had any legal authority to touch that money. I cross-referenced those access times with Victoria's social media posts. On March 15th, she'd transferred $7,400 at 11:23 p.m. while posting Instagram stories from a luxury spa weekend in Asheville. On June 8th, she'd moved another $74.95 while photographing dinner at a $200 per person restaurant. Each theft documented in real time by her own social media addiction. But the IP traces were just the beginning. I pulled security camera footage from First National Bank, where Victoria had been making cash deposits from her embezzlement. North Carolina requires banks to preserve security footage for 18 months, and my federal credentials still carried weight with security directors. The footage was devastating. 24 separate deposits, each for exactly $74.95 in cash. Victoria's face was clearly visible in every frame. She'd even signed deposit slips with her own name. The woman was either incredibly arrogant or incredibly stupid, probably both. Next, I analyzed the foundation's expenditure patterns. David had been meticulous about documentation. Every dollar spent required receipts, vendor contracts, and beneficiary verification. The foundation had helped 847 families over 3 years, covering medical bills, rent assistance, and counseling services. But Victoria's optimized operations showed a different pattern. In the 3 weeks since David's death, she'd approved payments to several new vendors, companies with generic names like Consulting Solutions LLC and Administrative Services Group. I traced these companies through North Carolina's business registration database. Every single one had been incorporated within the last 60 days. Every single one listed the same registered agent, Derek Morrison, Victoria's software developer boyfriend. Derek wasn't just moving into David's house. He was helping Victoria systematically loot David's foundation. I called Bluebridge Technologies' board of directors and shared my findings. 3 retired business executives who'd served as David's mentors were horrified to learn about the embezzlement. They immediately froze Victoria's access to company accounts and announced an emergency audit. Victoria's response was swift and panicked. She called me at 6:47 a.m. the next morning, screaming about harassment and sabotage, but between the profanity and threats she revealed something interesting. "You have no idea what you're messing with, old man. Derek and I have been planning this transition for months. We're legitimate business people trying to make the foundation more efficient. Planning for months, while David was dying. The audit will show everything is legal," she continued. "Every transaction, every expense, every payment is documented and justified. I'm sure it is. And when this is over, I'm suing you for defamation. Derek has connections in the legal community. We'll destroy what's left of your pathetic reputation."
Derek had connections. Interesting. "Victoria, I just want David's foundation to help families in need. It will help families. The right families. Families that actually deserve assistance instead of freeloaders looking for handouts. The right families." Victoria was planning to change the foundation's mission entirely. After hanging up, I continued building my evidence file. Bank records, security footage, IP logs, social media posts, business registration documents, and metadata analysis. By the end of the week, I had 847 pages of documentation proving systematic embezzlement and conspiracy to commit fraud. But I needed one more piece, something that would make the case absolutely bulletproof. I drove to David's house, Victoria's house now, and parked across the street. At 3:15 p.m., a white BMW pulled into the driveway. Derek Morrison stepped out, carrying a laptop bag and what appeared to be financial documents.
I photographed him entering the house with a telephoto lens. At 4:22 p.m., Derek and Victoria emerged together, walking to Derek's car while discussing something intensely. Victoria was carrying the same documents Derek had brought. They drove to PNC Bank on South Boulevard. I followed at a safe distance and watched Derek wait in the car while Victoria went inside. She emerged 23 minutes later, empty-handed. That evening, I checked the foundation's account activity. Another $74.95 had been transferred to Administrative Services Group at 4:45 p.m. The timing was perfect. Victoria had met with Derek, reviewed documents, gone to the bank, and immediately authorized another fraudulent payment. I had them dead to rights. But Victoria was about to make an even bigger mistake. According to her social media posts, she was planning something special for the 1-month anniversary of David's death, a charity gala.
A public celebration of the David Mitchell Foundation's new direction. 200 invited guests, local media coverage, a keynote speech by the grieving widow about continuing her late husband's legacy. Victoria was going to stand in front of Charlotte's business community and lie about stealing from cancer families, in front of witnesses, with media coverage, while I sat in the audience with 847 pages of evidence proving every word she said was fraud. The woman had just made this personal, and I was about to make it federal. Victoria showed up at my apartment building at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, pounding on my door like she was trying to break it down. I opened it to find her standing in the hallway, designer clothes wrinkled, makeup smeared, hands shaking with either rage or cocaine, possibly both. "You son of a bitch." "Good evening, Victoria. Don't you dare act calm. You know what you did." I stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. Better to have this conversation in private than let the neighbors hear her confessing to financial crimes in the hallway. "The audit," she said, pacing around my small living room like a caged animal. "You called the board and convinced them to freeze the accounts." I shared some concerns about irregular transactions. Irregular? Every transaction was legal, every payment was authorized, every expense was documented. "I'm sure you have documentation." "Damn right I do." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through files.
Derek and I have been building legitimate business relationships. Administrative Services Group provides real consulting services. Consulting Solutions, LLC handles real administrative functions. Real services, from companies that existed only on paper. What kind of consulting services? Financial optimization, process improvement, strategic planning, things an old computer janitor wouldn't understand. There it was again. Computer janitor. I walked to my desk and picked up a printed document. The IP address log showing Victoria's apartment as the source of 24 fraudulent transactions. "Victoria, we need to talk about 192.168.1105. Her face went white. "I don't know what that means." "It's an IP address. Your IP address. The digital fingerprint left every time you accessed foundation accounts from your apartment at 847 Providence Road." I handed her the printout. She stared at it like it was written in hieroglyphics. "This is fake."
"It's from your internet service provider. Every online transaction creates a digital trail.
Every login gets logged. Every access gets recorded. You can't prove anything. I walked back to my desk and picked up another document. Bank security camera stills showing Victoria making cash deposits. March 15th, 11:47 a.m., First National Bank. You deposited $7,495 in cash. Her hands were shaking harder now. That was legitimate foundation business. June 8th, 2:23 p.m., same bank, same amount. Want to see the other 22 photos? Victoria collapsed into my desk chair, staring at the evidence like it was a death sentence. You don't understand. Derek and I were trying to save the foundation. David was too generous, too trusting. He was giving money to people who didn't deserve it. Families dealing with cancer didn't deserve help. Some of them were lying. Some of them were exaggerating. Some of them could have afforded treatment if they'd made better life choices. Better life choices. Like choosing not to get cancer. So you decided to redirect the funds. We decided to be more selective, more strategic. Derek knows how to run a business efficiently. By stealing money and creating fake companies. By optimizing operations and eliminating waste. The woman had convinced herself that embezzlement was business optimization. Victoria, you have 48 hours to confess. Confess to what? Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, tax evasion, money laundering. Should I continue? You can't prove any of that. I picked up the complete evidence file. 847 pages of bank records, security footage, IP logs, business registrations, and metadata analysis. I can prove all of it. For the first time since David's funeral, Victoria looked genuinely afraid. What do you want? I want the foundation money returned. I want Derek's fake companies dissolved. I want you to resign from the board. And if I don't? Then this becomes a federal case, and Derek's connections in the legal community won't matter when FBI agents are putting handcuffs on both of you. Victoria stood up, smoothing her wrinkled dress with trembling hands. You have no idea who you're messing with, old man. Neither do you. She made her choice at 11:47 p.m. that night. Victoria launched her media campaign the next morning. By 8 a.m., she'd posted a tearful video on Facebook explaining how her jealous father-in-law was harassing her during her time of grief. By 10 a.m., she was giving an interview to WBTV about elder abuse and family dysfunction. By noon, she'd started a GoFundMe page for legal fees to protect a grieving widow from harassment. The performance was masterful. Designer tissues for the tears, professional lighting for the video, carefully chosen words that painted me as an unstable old man who couldn't accept his son's death. James Mitchell has been calling my bank, my business partners, my neighbors, she told the morning news anchor. He's convinced I'm some kind of criminal because he can't accept that David chose me over him. Chose me over him. The narrative was simple and effective. Bitter father versus devoted wife. Old money versus new love. Traditional family versus modern relationship. The comment section was brutal. This poor woman lost her husband and now has to deal with this. Typical boomer who can't handle a strong young woman. Father-in-law sounds jealous and controlling. She should get a restraining order. Victoria had done her homework. She knew that public opinion would side with a young widow over an elderly man. She knew that ageism was socially acceptable in ways that other prejudices weren't. She knew that people would assume the old guy was the problem. What Victoria didn't know was that her media blitz was creating new evidence. Every interview she gave, every statement she made, every detail she shared was being documented and analyzed. When someone lies publicly, they usually contradict their private statements. Victoria was no exception. In her Facebook video, she claimed David had been planning for months to leave everything to her. But in her WBTV interview, she said the will had been a complete surprise that she'd only discovered after his death. In her GoFundMe description, she wrote that David's father had never been involved in the foundation. But in her Channel 9 interview, she admitted he'd been asking detailed questions about financial management. In her morning radio call-in, she said Derek was just a friend providing emotional support. But her Instagram stories from the same day showed Derek carrying boxes into David's bedroom. Each lie created new inconsistencies. Each inconsistency provided new evidence of deception. Better yet, Victoria's media campaign had attracted attention from investigative reporters. Channel 9's consumer advocacy segment decided to dig deeper into the David Mitchell Foundation's finances. What they found was interesting. Public tax records showed the foundation had received over $2 million in donations since David's death.
Corporate sponsors, private donors, and charity events had poured money into the organization after David's story went viral during his final months. But those same tax records showed unusual patterns in recent expenditures, large payments to companies with no apparent connection to cancer support. Administrative costs that seemed disproportionate to the Foundation's mission. The reporters started asking questions. Who was Administrative Services Group? What services did Consulting Solutions LLC actually provide? Why had the Foundation's spending patterns changed so dramatically after David's death? Victoria's response was predictable. She accused the media of harassment. She claimed the investigation was motivated by my manipulation of reporters. She demanded privacy during her time of grief, but the damage was done. Public records are public for a reason. Foundation expenditures are required to be transparent. Financial irregularities don't disappear just because someone claims harassment. On Thursday night, my phone rang. Detective Mike Davis from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Mr. Mitchell, we need to talk.
About what? About some interesting findings in a certain foundation's financial records. Seems like someone's been making unauthorized transfers using forged authorization codes. I see. The thing is, these unauthorized transfers match a pattern we've been tracking across multiple nonprofit organizations. Same amounts, same timing, same methodology. We think someone's been running a systematic embezzlement operation. A systematic operation. Victoria and Derek weren't just stealing from David's foundation. They were stealing from multiple charities. What do you need from me? Everything you've got. Documents, analysis, evidence. We're building a federal case, and your background makes you an ideal witness. Federal case. The magic words that transform local fraud into serious prison time. Detective, I have 847 pages of documentation ready for review. Perfect. Can you come in tomorrow morning, and Mr. Mitchell? Yes. Bring copies.
Something tells me this is going to trial. Victoria's media campaign had backfired spectacularly. Instead of discrediting me, she'd attracted law enforcement attention to her crimes. The gala was tomorrow night. Time for the final play. I spent Friday morning at the police station, transferring 847 pages of evidence to Detective Davis and a federal prosecutor who'd driven down from the FBI's Charlotte field office. The case was bigger than I'd imagined. Victoria and Derek had been running their operation across 6 different nonprofit organizations in the Carolinas. Children's cancer charities, veterans support groups, domestic violence shelters. They'd stolen over $400,000 from families who could least afford it. Their methodology was sophisticated. Derek would identify foundations with loose financial oversight and single-person management structures. Victoria would cultivate relationships with the founders, usually targeting older men dealing with family tragedies. She'd offer emotional support, then gradually gain access to financial systems. Once inside, they'd create shell companies to receive fraudulent payments. Always under federal reporting thresholds.
Always with legitimate-sounding names. Always with Derek as the registered agent. They'd been perfecting the system for 2 years before David got sick. Your son's foundation was supposed to be their biggest score, the federal prosecutor explained. $2.3 million in assets, plus ongoing donations that could have funded their operation for years. Could have. Past tense. What happens now? We execute search warrants tonight after the gala. Multiple locations, multiple agencies. This is going to be a coordinated takedown. Why wait until after the gala? Detective Davis smiled. Because your daughter-in-law is planning to announce the Foundation's expansion tonight. She's going to stand up in front of 200 witnesses and claim credit for growing David's legacy, while stealing from it. And we'll have it all on video. The irony was perfect. Victoria's moment of triumph would become her moment of destruction. That afternoon, I reviewed David's personal files one final time. Hidden in his desk drawer, I found something that broke my heart and completed the case simultaneously. A notebook, David's handwriting, documenting suspicious financial activity he'd noticed in his final months. March 15th, V accessed Foundation account from home. Asked her about it. Says she was checking balances for tax preparation. April 22nd, another large cash deposit to her personal account. Says it's from freelance marketing work, but can't name the client. May 18th, Derek asking detailed questions about Foundation management. Wants to know about board structure, audit requirements, dissolution procedures. June 8th. Found invoices for companies I don't recognize.
Administrative Services Group charged $7,495 for strategic planning consultation. No one told me about any strategic planning. July 15th. V upset that I'm asking too many questions about finances. Says I don't trust her. Maybe I don't. David had known.
In his final months, fighting cancer and preparing for death, my son had been trying to protect his foundation from the woman sleeping in his bed. The final entry was dated August 3rd, 4 days before David's death. Dad knows about financial investigations. Should I tell him about V? Don't want to burden him while I'm dying. Maybe I can handle this myself. Maybe after I'm gone, he'll figure it out. David had been protecting me while I was trying to protect him. I photographed every page of that notebook. Evidence of Victoria's betrayal, but also evidence of my son's character. Even while dying, he'd been thinking about other families, trying to preserve resources that could help them fight the same battle he was losing. The gala was scheduled to begin in 3 hours. Victoria would take the stage at 8 p.m. sharp, according to the evening's program.
She'd announce the foundation's new direction, introduce Derek as her strategic partner, and reveal plans to expand their operations across the Southeast. 200 guests would applaud her vision. Local media would document her leadership. Business leaders would congratulate her innovation, and federal agents would be watching from the back of the room, waiting for her to finish confessing to conspiracy and fraud before they moved in with handcuffs. I dressed carefully for the evening, navy suit, white shirt, David's cufflinks. I wanted to look respectable when I testified about my son's character and his foundation's true mission. At 6 p.m., I received a text from Detective Davis. Units in position, warrants signed, ready when you are. I drove to the Charlotte Country Club, where Victoria had rented the ballroom for $15,000 that the foundation couldn't afford. Valet parking that cost more per hour than most families spent on groceries. An open bar featuring premium liquors that David would never have approved, all paid for with money stolen from cancer patients. As I walked into the ballroom, I saw Victoria near the entrance, greeting guests in a $3,000 designer gown, and those same designer accessories she'd bought with embezzled funds. She saw me and smiled. Not a warm smile, a predator's smile. She thought she'd won. The gala was about to begin. The Charlotte Country Club ballroom buzzed with conversation as Charlotte's elite gathered to celebrate the David Mitchell Foundation's bright future. 200 guests in evening wear, local news cameras positioned strategically around the room, a projection screen displaying photos of David during his final months, when he was still trying to help other families while fighting his own battle. Victoria stood at the podium, radiant in her designer gown, the picture of a grieving widow who'd transformed tragedy into purpose.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate my late husband's legacy. Applause filled the room. I sat in the back, watching federal agents positioned near the exits, their presence invisible to everyone except me. David Mitchell believed that no family should face cancer alone, Victoria continued. He believed that with proper resources and strategic management, we could eliminate the financial devastation that too often accompanies medical crises. More applause. She was good at this. Confident, articulate, emotionally compelling. If I didn't know she was a thief, I might have believed her myself. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that the David Mitchell Foundation has raised over $500,000 in new donations since David's passing. Money that will help deserving families navigate their darkest hours. Deserving families. There was that phrase again. But more importantly, we're announcing a fundamental evolution in how we operate.
Under new strategic leadership from Derek Morrison and Administrative Services Group, we're implementing efficiency protocols that will maximize every donor dollar. She gestured toward Derek, who stood near the front in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, smiling like he owned the room. Derek brings 20 years of software development experience and proven expertise in financial optimization. Together, we've identified numerous areas where the foundation was, frankly, too generous with unverified claims. Unverified claims, like the medical bills from families dying of cancer. Moving forward, we'll require comprehensive documentation, independent verification, and strategic oversight for every expenditure. No more emotional decision-making. No more wasteful spending on families who haven't exhausted their own resources. The audience was eating it up. Business efficiency applied to charity work. Accountability and oversight, buzzwords that sounded responsible and modern. What they were really hearing was Victoria explain how she planned to deny help to families in crisis while stealing their donations. In the past 6 months alone,
We've identified over $180,000 in questionable expenditures that would never have passed our new verification protocols. $180,000. The exact amount she'd embezzled. Victoria was standing in front of 200 witnesses and confessing to her crimes while claiming they were improvements. These funds have been redirected to legitimate consulting services, administrative oversight, and strategic planning initiatives that will ensure the Foundation's long-term sustainability. Redirected to Derek's shell companies. I stood up. The movement caught Victoria's attention. Her confident smile faltered for just a moment when she saw me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom, "my name is James Mitchell.
David was my son." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't part of the program. "Miss Bennett has just confessed to embezzling $180,000 from families fighting cancer." The murmurs turned to gasps. "She's lying," Victoria said into the microphone. "This man has been harassing me for weeks, spreading conspiracy theories because he can't accept that David chose me over him." "I have evidence," I said, walking toward the front of the room. 847 pages of bank records, security footage, IP address logs, and business registration documents proving systematic fraud. "He's delusional," Victoria insisted. "Security, please remove this man." But security wasn't moving. They were too busy staring at Detective Davis and Agent Williams, who had just stepped forward, badges visible. "Miss Bennett," Detective Davis said, "we need to have a conversation." The ballroom erupted, guests turning to each other in confusion. Cameras swinging toward the police officers. Victoria's face draining of color as she realized what was happening. "This is harassment," she said into the microphone. "I'm a grieving widow being persecuted by a bitter old man and corrupt police officers." "Ma'am, please step away from the podium," Agent Williams said. "No, I'm giving a speech. These people came to hear about David's foundation, not listen to conspiracy theories from—" "We have a federal warrant for your arrest," Detective Davis interrupted. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and tax evasion." The words echoed through the ballroom's sound system. Federal warrant, conspiracy, embezzlement, money laundering. Victoria's lawyer, who'd been sitting at a front table, stood up and started moving toward the exit. "Smart man." "You can't arrest me," Victoria said. "I haven't done anything wrong. Every transaction was legal. Every payment was authorized." "By companies that don't exist," I said. "Using authorization codes you forged." Agent Williams approached the podium with handcuffs. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." "This is insane!" Victoria screamed. "Derek, tell them." But Derek was already gone. He'd slipped out the back exit the moment badges appeared. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. The elegant widow disappeared, replaced by a panicked criminal who just realized her life was over. "You have no idea what you've done," she screamed at me. "David was dying anyway. That money would have been wasted on families who were going to lose anyway. We were making it useful by stealing it. Derek and I built something legitimate. We were helping the foundation operate efficiently. We were eliminating waste." She kept talking, confessing to more crimes with every sentence while federal agents read her rights and the cameras rolled. "You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney—" "I can afford 10 attorneys. I'm not some broke old man who never accomplished anything. I'm a successful businesswoman who was trying to save a failing charity." The handcuffs clicked into place. The ballroom was completely silent except for the soft whir of news cameras capturing every moment. Victoria Bennett Mitchell, the grieving widow who'd inherited millions, stood at the podium in handcuffs and a designer gown, having just confessed to multiple federal crimes in front of 200 witnesses and live television cameras. The status reversal was complete. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, taking the microphone as federal agents led Victoria away, "the David Mitchell Foundation will continue to help families fighting cancer, under proper oversight, with legitimate expenses, and with zero tolerance for anyone who would steal from families in crisis." The applause started slowly, then built to a standing ovation. Through the ballroom windows, I could see Derek being arrested in the parking lot. Apparently, federal agents had been watching both exits. As the crowd began to disperse, shaking their heads and discussing what they'd just witnessed, Detective Davis approached me. "Hell of a way to spend an evening. Hell of a way to honor my son's memory. The foundation will be restructured with professional oversight and a legitimate board of directors. Every stolen dollar will be returned. Every family Victoria denied help will be contacted. And you? I looked around the ballroom where David's photos still decorated the walls. My son, smiling in hospital beds while he planned ways to help other families. Fighting cancer with dignity while trying to protect resources for people facing the same battle. I'll make sure his real legacy continues. Outside, news vans were arriving.
Victoria's media campaign had worked perfectly, just not the way she'd planned.
6 months later, I was sitting in the same federal courthouse where Victoria Bennett Mitchell accepted her plea agreement. 18 months in federal prison. Full restitution of $412,000 stolen from 6 different charities. Permanent ban from serving on any nonprofit board. Derek Morrison got 2 years for conspiracy and money laundering. His software development skills turned out to be less useful when federal agents were analyzing his digital crimes. The David Mitchell Foundation was restructured with a professional board of directors, independent financial oversight, and transparent reporting requirements. We'd not only recovered every stolen dollar, but donations had actually increased after the story went national. Apparently, people appreciated charity leaders who actually prosecuted thieves instead of tolerating them. Victoria's designer handbag and watch were sold at federal auction. The proceeds went to cancer families. The irony was perfect. I'd moved back into David's house. Victoria's boyfriend had abandoned the lease on her expensive apartment, and the property management company was happy to rent to someone who actually paid bills on time. The foundation's new offices were located where David's bedroom used to be. Every morning, I'd review applications from families facing cancer, approving legitimate medical expenses and rent assistance. Real oversight, real accountability, real help for people who needed it. The quiet ones, as it turned out, had built systems that thieves couldn't escape. But more importantly, we'd built something else. A foundation that actually honored David's memory instead of exploiting it. Resources that reached families instead of funding designer accessories. Hope for people fighting the same battle David had faced with such dignity. Last week, I received a letter from a mother in Asheville whose son was undergoing leukemia treatment. The foundation had covered 3 months of rent while her family focused on medical care instead of eviction notices. "Your son saved my son," she wrote. "Thank you for making sure his legacy survived." David's legacy had survived. Not because a thief had inherited his money, but because someone who loved him had fought to protect it. My phone buzzed with a text message from Agent Williams. "James, got another case that could use your expertise. Financial fraud at a veterans charity. Interested?" I smiled and typed back a single word. "Absolutely. 30 years of federal training never really retires. It just finds new ways to serve justice."